Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. Valhalla. There was one very special thing that made the Viking warriors of the Middle Ages so scary: their belief in Valhalla. In Norse mythology, Valhalla is the hall of slain warriors in the afterlife, literally translated to Hall of the Slain. Vikings believed that if they died valiantly in battle, they would be selected by Odin's Valkyries to sit in the Great Hall with all the legendary warriors of old. It was also believed that when it came time for the apocalypse, what the Vikings called Ragnarok, the eternal warriors in Valhalla would rise up to fight against the forces of chaos. But could Valhalla be a real place right here on Earth? The answer is a little more complicated than you might think. It has a lot to do with the word itself. Valhalla comes from the Norse Valhall, with the hall part being a reference to a rock. Many scholars believe the original meaning of Valhall was Rock of the Slain. In the original days of Norse mythology, when the myths were still being created, the Valkyries were demons of death who carried fallen warriors to an eternal battlefield. Over the years, the Rock of the Slain changed to the Hall of the Slain, and Valhall to Valhalla. But if there was a real place on this planet that inspired the tale of Valhalla, where would it be? Some have speculated there may have been a great battle once, an unknown ancient fight so massive that it went down in history as a legend. The location of the battle, likely waged in the mountains, became the Rock of the Slain. Warriors told stories of it so much that it got incorporated into their myths, becoming a place where all warriors wished to fight. Number 9. Arcadia. Arcadia is both a real location in modern Greece and a mythological place from Greek mythology. The legendary Arcadia was supposedly located in the Peloponnese Peninsula in southern Greece. According to the myths, Arcadia was a mysterious place home to mythical creatures, tree spirits, centaurs, living trees known as dryads, and gods and goddesses. The main god who lived in Arcadia was Pan, lord of the wilderness. Hermes also happened to live in Arcadia, god of thieves. In the stories, Arcadia was paradise. Think of it as the ancient Greek version of Eden, an untouched wilderness rich in green forests, colorful flowers, delicious plants, and babbling brooks. But Arcadia was also dangerous. It was a beautiful place on paper, but any human who wandered too deep into the wilderness found themselves in a vast swamp. The deeper, darker depths of the woods were home to horrible creatures, such as the giant birds whose beaks were made of bronze and their feathers made of sharp metal. What's really interesting is that Arcadia, the real one, isn't that much different from the legendary Arcadia. The real-life Arcadia is a region of heavily forested mountains, a place sparsely populated and rarely ever conquered. Because of its unique landscape and deep valleys, humans have generally stayed away. In all likelihood, the legendary forest and its frightening monsters was likely inspired by the same wilderness. And now for number 8. But first, it's shout-out time! I want to say a big thank you to Elizabeth Warman and Mo Hudspeth for supporting this channel. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these. Number 8. Shambhala. Shambhala is an old Sanskrit word that means place of peace. It's a mythical paradise that can be found mentioned in many texts from the ancient world. Shambhala is mentioned in Tibetan Buddhism and in mysterious pieces of scripture from the Zhang culture. The Zhang came before the Tibetan Buddhists, and according to them, Shambhala was a land where only those with the purest of hearts could live. Only someone who managed to achieve enlightenment could find the magical land of Shambhala. In the Buddhist myths that came later, Shambhala grew to be a kingdom where only those with love and wisdom in their heart were able to live, and where the people never suffered, wanted for anything, or grew old. The truth is that throughout the centuries, Shambhala has gone by many names: the Forbidden Land, the Land of Radiant Spirits, the Land of Living Gods. The list goes on and on. In Hindu mythology, they call it Aryavartha, which means the land of the worthy ones. In Chinese mythology, the place is called Xitian. Even the Russians have their own version of Shambhala called Belovoide. Stories of a mythical land of peace and harmony have been told by cultures throughout Asia for thousands of years. Nobody even knows who the first culture was that came up with the idea of such a place. And this brings us to the big question: was Shambhala ever a real place? Unfortunately, the answer is most likely not. Explorers have been looking for the physical location for centuries. Even the Nazis allegedly sent expeditions to Tibet in search of Shambhala, but nobody has ever found it. Do you think it truly exists? Let me know in the comments. Number 7. Ramasetu. Ramasetu, or Adam's Bridge, is a real place of incredible mystery. It is the remnant of a land bridge that once connected India and Sri Lanka. Just a few thousand years ago, you would have been able to walk from the southern tip of India over the bridge and arrive on the northern tip of Sri Lanka. Geologists say the bridge, which is a narrow stretch of mostly submerged dirt and rock, is nothing to get that excited about. They say the Ramasetu has nothing to do with legends or mythologies. They say it's just a geological formation, as ordinary as any piece of land on the planet. Wow, way to make it special. Researchers are always taking the magic out of things, but good news is that might not be the case. The bridge itself is impressive, 30 miles long and about 3 feet underwater in most places. What's really interesting is that the bridge has never been comprehensively studied. Scientists can speculate all they want, but there is insufficient evidence to say whether Adam's Bridge is entirely natural or it was built. Some geologists have estimated the rocks in the center of the bridge to be about 7,000 years old, with the sandbar at either side only 4,000 years old. This would imply that rocks were brought from somewhere else to create the bridge. In Hindu legend, Ramasetu was a bridge built by the god Rama with help from an army of monkeys. The bridge was made so that Rama could reach the island and save his wife Sita, who had been taken there. Local records claim the bridge was walkable up until the 15th century. A cyclone finally destroyed what little remained of the bridge in 1480, and the whole thing sank underwater. Number 6. The Valley of Diamonds. Sinbad the Sailor is one of history's favorite adventurers. Tales of Sinbad began to circulate in the world of Islam at around the same time tales of King Arthur appeared in England. In the stories, Sinbad comes from somewhere near Baghdad in the 8th century AD, during the rule of the Abbasid Caliphate. He then goes on 7 voyages around the seas of Africa and Asia. Sinbad has lots of adventures. He fights magical beings, and he encounters tons of monsters. Historians generally agree the hero Sinbad was a fictional character, not a real man. But that's nothing but speculation. There is no surefire way to say if the Persian adventurer, introduced in Arabian Nights alongside heroes like Ali Baba and Aladdin, was based on a real historical figure or not. There is one rather remarkable story in the Epic of Sinbad. In the tale, Sinbad becomes stranded on a seemingly deserted island. There are a few fantastic things that happen, like Sinbad fighting a monstrous bird and getting into a battle with giant snakes. But at one point, he comes across a valley, with the floor of this valley covered in diamonds. There are so many precious gemstones that Sinbad was able to purchase himself a whole fleet of ships. Many have speculated the legendary Valley of Diamonds may have been a real place, perhaps in India, since that was where diamonds were first found on the bottoms of riverbeds. Do you believe Sinbad the Sailor and the Valley of Diamonds were real? Let me know in the comments. Number 5. The Island of California. The island of California is a legendary cartographical error. It's gone down in history as one of the biggest mapping mistakes ever, and it all began in the 16th century. In the early days of American exploration, no one could decide if Baja California was an island, a peninsula, or attached to mainland North America. Maps in the 16th century showed Baja California as a massive island separated by a strait of water. For some bizarre reason, the cartographic error continued into the 17th and 18th centuries. Even though explorers were adamant that Baja California was indeed connected to the mainland, it kept showing up in maps as an island. Then, things started to get weird. People began to confuse the island of California with legends of places like the Garden of Eden and Atlantis. Rumors spread through Europe that there was a magical island paradise off the western coast of North America. Explorers did eventually create proper maps, and the island of California's legend was put to bed, but it took a really long time. In Stanford's Glenn McLaughlin collection of California, there are over 1,000 maps showing California as an island. One of the weirdest descriptions came from 1510, when Garcia Rodriguez de Montalvo described the island of California as a terrestrial paradise where people lived like the Amazons. Number 4. Magmel. Magmel is a mythical utopia from Irish mythology. It was really the Irish version of Greece's Arcadia and Asia's Shambhala. In the Irish legends, Magmel is described as an island somewhere to the west of Ireland. The Irish believed it to be a real physical place, but only accessible to certain individuals. And like the other utopias from ancient lore, Magmel was without pain, suffering, or hunger. Those who managed to reach the mythical island enjoy eternal life and all pleasurable pursuits imaginable. For the Irish, Magmel was truly heaven on earth. Legends also say that Magmel was ruled by King Tethra of the Fomorians. This was a little bizarre because most mythical utopias didn't have human rulers. These were supposed to be otherworldly places without kings and queens, where everyone was equally young and beautiful. This has led many scholars to wonder if there wasn't indeed an island somewhere near the Irish coast ruled by a small, youthful, and exceptionally beautiful group. In later years, after Ireland had given up paganism for Christianity, the stories of Magmel changed. It shifted from a mythical utopia to a real island, one supposedly visited by explorers traveling across the Atlantic. Would you like to visit Magmel? Let us know in the comments. Number 3. Fushan. Fushan is described in ancient Chinese literature as a mythical place somewhere east of China. The legend began about 1,500 years ago, thanks to Buddhist missionary Fushan. He claimed there was a vast land, which he called Fushan, extremely far to the east. It was so far that it could only be North America. British historian Joseph Needham tried to identify Fushan as the Buryat region of Siberia. However, many think Fushan was a city or land in North America populated by Native Americans. This would have been about 1,000 years before Christopher Columbus arrived in North America. It would also have been about 500 years before the Vikings landed in Canada. According to the legend, the Buddhist missionary arrived in China in 450 AD, then traveled by ship to Fushan. He didn't return until 499, at which point he reported his discovery to the Chinese emperor. Everything the missionary said was written down, so we know his claims were at least somewhat legitimate. The missionary did indeed discover a mysterious land. We just don't know if it was North America, an unknown island civilization, or perhaps Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula. What do you think? Were the Chinese maybe the first ones to discover America? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 2. Antilia. In the 15th century, Venetian cartographer Zuene Pizzigano created a chart showing a mysterious group of islands. These islands are known as the Antilia group, with the biggest and most important being Antilia itself, also called the Isle of Seven Cities. The map shows Western Europe, Northwest Africa, and a huge chunk of the North Atlantic Ocean. The chart even has the Madeira Islands on it, found by Portuguese sailors in 1419. It also shows the Azores archipelago, not discovered until about 1431. That was almost a decade after Pizzigano made his chart in 1424. The biggest issue with this ancient map is that the islands it shows likely don't even exist. No living human has ever laid eyes on the island of Antilia, and yet its history somehow goes back to the 8th century AD. According to local legends in Spain, Antilia was settled by a group of 7 Visigoth bishops. When the Muslims came and conquered Hispania in 714, a group of powerful Visigoths fled and established 7 settlements on the island. There was one for each bishop. But that's as far as the tale goes. We don't know what happened to the bishops or their cities, and no trace of Antilia has ever been found. We only have the island's name on a random map made 600 years ago. Number 1. Cellywig. Before King Arthur held court at Camelot, he held court in a mythical place called Cellywig or Heshewig. In the ancient Welsh tale Culhwch and Olwen, dated to the 11th century, King Arthur is mentioned for the very first time. This is about 100 years before King Arthur became really famous, with the writings of Geoffrey of Monmouth, who had King Arthur ruling over Camelot. But in this original text, a story significantly older, King Arthur lives in Cellywig. The name translates roughly to Forest Grove. Nobody knows where this place may have been. However, Cellywig was likely a real stronghold. People knew about it because the name continued to pop up in random pieces of text all through the Middle Ages. There are even Welsh manuscripts from as recently as the 1800s that mention Cellywig as the throne of Cornwall. It's difficult to know what to make of all this. The ancient account of King Arthur from 1,000 years ago seems to suggest he was definitely a real historical figure. But rather than living in Camelot and being assisted by a wizard, he may have ruled from a modest throne somewhere in Cornwall. If Forest Grove is any indication, the stronghold may have been hidden somewhere deep in the woods. Do you think King Arthur was a real hero or some make-believe character? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching. Remember to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!